We're going to start with a scenario. So here's our situation. We have a lovely 76-year-old woman who was referred to a physical therapist for incontinence and possible prolapse. She's had 10 children, all vaginally, with very little complication with her deliveries. Her incontinence started after her first few kids, and she'd kind of noticed maybe things weren't feeling like they used to down there. So let's fast forward a little bit. Her examination with the therapist, she is then positioned on the table, has a drape in place, and is undressed from the waist down. The therapist is at the foot of the table. Pause. We don't generally use stirrups as physical therapists. Women, we pretty much all know what it feels like to be in stirrups. They're not the most comfortable of things. All right. So during this exam, this lovely lady is asked to bear down and cough. And that's done to see if there's any leaking that will occur, as well as if there is a prolapse, it's going to happen then. So this lovely lady bears down and coughs, and her bladder proceeds to fall out onto the therapist's table. And yes, fall out, like OU2, out. But this lovely lady doesn't miss a beat, looks at the therapist and goes, "Oh, don't worry, honey, it happens all the time." And she proceeds to place her hands between her legs and pushes it right back in. So, how is this normal? What was this lovely woman thinking when it came to this being normal? Well, come to find out, her mother had quote unquote things fall out. Her grandmother had the same. And so this lady thought these things were all normal. However, what's common is not normal. If, let's say, my liver fell out, I would be a little concerned. They're supposed to stay inside, right? Things don't normally fall outside of our bodies. So that brings me kind of to the topic at hand. There's a lot of bits and pieces out there about women's health that is assumed to be normal, but isn't. It's common. Sad part is a lot of women just think this way. Look at education. So with women, generally little girls, moms, a female aunt, someone trusted, will have these conversations about the stuff that happens. Usually it's a one-time thing, it's considered gross, no one really wants to talk about it, it's awkward for everyone, and it's avoided then because it's icky. So that's what's commonly done. But how is that normal? It's normal to have questions later. Oftentimes, children aren't even taught the correct terms. They learn pee-pee and private, which is okay, keep things protected, but to not know the normal terms for your body, how many little girls know things about what their vagina is? I can promise every little boy knows what a penis is. So why would we avoid these things? Why do we need to avoid this? Because I promise you, guys sit there and talk, "Hey, this is who I laid this weekend, it was blah, blah, blah." But when we talk about these icky things, we think about this as normal. It's okay to talk about this. If you look at our lovely lady, her physician had never brought it up. Most women don't because they think it's normal. It's assumed by the physician, if there's a problem, you'll say something, right? However, these things shouldn't happen. We don't want to talk about the nasty, right? Women's bodies are rarely talked about, even amongst ourselves. When's the last time you asked your girls about anything of their body, besides, "Oh, I'm cramping"? This topic is avoided so much, it has gotten so bad that when we mention it, it's sometimes even mentioned as a joke. "Hee hee, I peed a little when I laughed." Or we belittle ourselves and say things like, "Man, she's bitchy, she must be PMSing." Really, come on. We belittle ourselves and women belittle women. Yeah, cramping sucks, let's be honest. At some point we learn about it and we learn to deal with it, maybe on our own, but it still sucks. So the common versus normal things even goes on in education. I'm not trying to gentleman bash here, but a lot of women don't even know about their own anatomy, and they don't share necessarily what they do know with their sons about female anatomy or how things function. It's common not to teach kids in the name of things. However, boys aren't even often taught much about the menstrual cycle. They know women go a little cray once a month, but they don't necessarily know why or what's happening or the function of it. With school and education, oftentimes kids have about one day, usually about an hour, of talking about nasty stuff in their health class, and they get about 1 hour of sex ed, where everything is supposed to be covered in that 1 hour. How does that really work out? How many of us really remember from that class what our menstrual cycle was? You have one class on it, right? We all know in education the best thing to do is have repetition to help retain it. You talk to mom maybe once. Some parents even rely on that sex ed hour to cover everything they need to. But you don't hear it. You don't hear it even later on. A lot of anatomy classes are actually focused more on male anatomy than female anatomy. So how is that normal? It's common to talk about, the anatomy in class, but even the little bit about women we get, it's so tiny, it's almost non-existent. So how can we be expected to deal with things for men or women? So for example, the education this gentleman had, a friend of mine's husband, was extremely limited. He had no sisters. His mother never talked about things that happened with her body. He actually never had his hour of sex ed because the school he went to did not cover that content. So as he's dating who would eventually be his wife, she was talking about how uncomfortable she was because she was cramping. Well, he looked at her and said, I don't really understand why this is an issue. Like, it's coming, right? It's going to come every month. Can't you just get used to it? So she proceeds to pause and look at her husband and say, all right, here's what we're going to do. Once a month, I'm going to kick you in the nuts. I'm only going to do it once, though. You know when it's coming. It's going to come the same week every month. You deal with it. Don't you just get used to it? He was flabbergasted. He's like, so it's really, really uncomfortable? Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Oftentimes, it's very uncomfortable. So that's some of the common misperceptions about health in general that aren't normal. And we're going to take this a little further. Let's talk about sex. So everyone believes that tearing the hymen during sex is normal. However, a lot of women don't have a hymen when they are intimate for the first time. A lot of athletes have torn it at some point during different sports events or practice. Other individuals have such a small one it may just tear naturally, or using a tampon may tear it. Some women never tear theirs. So the whole theory that sex is the only way a hymen's torn and that's how you tell if someone is a virgin or not, no. Common misperception, not normal. It gets even more complicated with sex. So boys talk to dad or a brother, male confidant, about how things work, what it's like. A lot of times friends will talk about, oh, you need to do this. It'll really get her going. There's tons of websites out there about men and sex and how to make it better for themselves, or how many of us have gotten those emails about penis, different medications to improve erection or to make things longer. Yeah, how many of those do you get from women? I'm even female and I get the male sex ads, but it's out there, right? So with sex for women, we don't hear about it. We have generally that little bitty icky talk with, a female trusted someone, and then maybe a little bit in school, but that's it. So it's common for women to think that having an orgasm just with penetration is normal. No, it's not. It's common, but not normal. So when you're having intimacy for the first time, oftentimes we need more stimulation. It can be uncomfortable. Further on, you've been intimate for a while, your partner may need to stimulate you more to have an orgasm. That's normal. Just having one with penetration is common. The thought is common, but it's not normal. Things such as peeing yourself after pregnancy. It's common, but it's also not normal. There's things that can be done to help prevent that leakage. We'll go even further. Self-stimuli. It's okay. It's okay to do those things. That's how you're going to learn about your body. You understand then what feels good. You can educate your partner as to what feels good, what helps, what gets you to the point of a natural orgasm. Common we avoid that, but it shouldn't be normal. friend of mine once stated, you know, when I got married, I think my husband knew more about a vagina than I did. She had been taught it was icky to do anything. It was icky to talk about these things with someone. It's impolite to bring it up. She hadn't even brought up to her physician after she'd been married for a while that she wasn't having, you know, satisfaction with sex. She was never getting to climax. Was afraid to bring it up because she'd always been taught it was impolite. Well, finally, she brings it up, and the physician was flabbergasted she'd been having this problem for so long. Well, why didn't you talk to me? She didn't think she could or that she should. So, that nasty philosophy, it's that way because we've made it that way. Why is it so faux pas to talk about things when it comes to women's health and our bodies? Again, gentlemen talk about things often amongst their friends, but we as women don't. We need to educate ourselves to understand what's normal versus what is common. Remember, not the same thing. So tying this all together, and there's so much more I could go on with this topic, but really think about in the future, what's common isn't normal. Learn about your body, learn about its normal function, and let's break down these walls about, you know, not talking about things with our friends. Bring it up, talk to each other. That's one of the best ways for us to learn what is normal. For example, when I spoke to some of my lady friends, some female friends about actually this TED Talk, and they had brought up things that were common misperceptions. Well, one of our ladies' husbands had said, well, isn't it normal just to have, you know, only climaxing just with penetration, nothing else? That women don't generally climax when it comes to oral intimacy. And he had no idea it was different. But on top of that, his wife didn't either. She thought it was, you know, the thing, normal, to not climax with any type of oral activity or intimacy. You should be able to get there, okay? So, again, learn about your body.